If you're looking for some straight up marketing advice that's super chilled and also a bit of a laugh, then grab yourself a drink and get ready for Marketing and Margaritas, a podcast that makes marketing entertaining. Brought to you by Rebel Nation, direct from regional Queensland.
Hello and welcome to Marketing and Margaritas. Today, Jade and I are joined by our wonderful web developer, Taryn McCauley, and we're talking about making your website marvelous on mobile. So obviously when you should all have a website, we've talked about this before, when you've made your website, it being 10 years ago, whenever you did it, making sure it works on mobile was always been a priority, but actually diving deeper into how that works now with the user experience and a few other things.
Yeah, so it's no longer like, it should be a given that your website is mobile responsive. Like if you're still asking a developer if your website's responsive, that's a really bad sign. Like It should be a given, but it's more about it being a good experience on mobile. And that's why we have our web dev in.
So I guess for the novices out there, what does mobile responsive actually mean? Can you explain that to you?
So I think for me, mobile responsive is like when you have good functionality on both desktop and mobile, because when you go through UX design and if I click on this button, I go to this page, that's all front of mind when you're developing for desktop, because that's what we develop on PCs. That's front of mind.
Yeah.
But you also want to make sure that mobile also works well, that people are going to your CTAs, that those header images are catching your eye and keeping your attention.
Stuff is fitting that viewing platform properly. You can see the buttons. You're not having to zoom in or out to try and find what you're looking for.
You want to make sure that the user is able to flow from your content from page to page in a way that is just as convenient and
easy to navigate as desktop. I think in a really basic level, mobile responsive just means that it responds to a mobile device. So basically when your website is on mobile, it responds to being on there to show it the way that best suits that platform.
Yeah.
And this is really important for two big reasons. So first of all is, like you mentioned, UX, which for people who don't know is user experience.
Right.
So user experience, basically so much of our internet traffic comes through mobile. Like most of us, we actually do a lot of our, not necessarily for work, but I think a lot of our personal searching and stuff happens, like if you're looking for a Sparky or whatever like that, like you're on your phone, I don't even have a proper home computer kind of thing. So you're doing it on your mobile. So it is about, that's what I was saying. So yes, internet traffic coming from mobile. So we need to be, for the user experience, it really needs to be good for mobile. And it used to be like, you used to have to pinch and zoom into things. And there's still government websites, like of all fucking people, that when you go to like fill something out and you have to pinch and zoom. And I'm just like, this is so useless. Like, come on guys, get your shit together.
Yeah.
So I think people are really expecting a seamless experience across any device. So if I'm on a website, on my computer, on my laptop, on my tablet, on my mobile, I expect all of them to look good and function well and be easy to navigate and all that kind of stuff.
And as a business owner, you should want that for your clients as well.
Yeah.
You should want them to be able to do that. If they're getting frustrated.
Look, my website's shit on mobile, too bad, that's your fucking problem.
I've got a website, doesn't matter, who cares? You go to this one.
No, that seems like a real recipe for success.
And then secondly, we really need to make sure that we have mobile responsive sites because of SEO.
Yeah.
So pretty much it came out probably like 4 or 5 years ago. No, probably 3 or 4 years ago, to be honest, that Google said that they were going to start marking down websites that weren't mobile optimized. So it started to be only on mobile search. So if you were doing a search for something and your site wasn't mobile optimized, it wouldn't even show up in results. Like it affected your searchability. Yeah.
I knew it was bad. I didn't realize it was that prominent.
No.
So
it started where it was just downgrading it. Then it was like stripping out from results. And then they started doing it for desktop searches as well. So it affects your SEO rating for searchability everywhere.
Which makes sense.
If it's not mobile responsive. Well, because again, Google knows that sites need to be mobile responsive. They don't want to offer up search results that give people a shit experience, because then people won't stay.
On them.
Yeah, exactly. They want to give people what they want. That's what, that's for. So yes, they're the two things that are really important about why you need to be mobile responsive.
Awesome. Well, we didn't really invite Taryn on just to listen to you talk. So we're going to ask Taryn some tips for making your website marvelous on mobile. So the first one we talked about previously when we were planning this was navigation. So what have you got for making it marvelous there?
So usually if you go to a website, it's like one of those things where you expect to have either a plus or a burger menu or some sort of button in the top right. You click on that and it brings up a menu with your things. your options. One thing to keep in mind is depending on how many items you have in your nav, that like transition might have to happen earlier. Like I know for some of the sites we've done recently, we have it actually transition to that mobile menu by the time it reaches tablet size, because otherwise all of your nav items are bunched
Crammed
together.
Yeah.
Buttons don't look good. It's hard to click
Drops
things.
down and stuff. Yeah, exactly. It can be overlapping and shit.
Whereas if it goes to a burger menu, it's just nice. It's convenient. Things are easy to click, especially if you're on touch devices. You don't want stuff next to each other because you then press on one thing and you mean the other.
And then that's where your zoom issue becomes a thing again, because the user's trying to navigate around that. Exactly. So a burger menu is those line kind of button that's usually in the corner or something.
Yeah. But sometimes it'll be a plus. Like burger menu is specifically for those 3 lines, but mobile menu doesn't quite have the same ring to it. But yeah, next is also like not having a heap of nested folders in your nav. Like if I, on desktop, hover over item 1 and a folder of options comes down, and then I go to item 3 and another folder comes down, that's annoying in and of itself, because the moment you accidentally move your mouse too far, your entire folder closes.
Yeah.
But also on mobile or tablet, if you've got that menu showing there, clicking on option 1, it goes through another item. I have to click on number 3. That is like 10, 15 more seconds than someone should have to spend to get to those items.
And we know as a user, too many clicks, we get bored and we go somewhere else.
Yeah, too high basket.
So that comes back to your planning of your website, of what content you're actually putting on. So we do get...
Your site mapping.
Yeah, we get a lot of people going, I want to put all this information on. And we're like, well, maybe that could also go on this page rather than having its own page. You've still got the information there happening for SEO. We're just making it more ideal for the user to actually find it.
And a lot of those like bigger sites, because if you have a heap of pages, that's unavoidable. You're going to have a messy site map, but what a
larger site map.
A larger site map. But what a lot of like bigger sites like Myers and stuff do is they have a expanded nav in their footer. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for those specific pages, you just go to the bottom of the page and you've got a massive long list, and you can go from there and find what you're looking for. Or having like a search bar at the top so that people can search for things. That's also another way to kind of get around cramming all of these items in your main nav.
Yeah. Awesome. And it needs to have good contrast, you were saying.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. Like if we're on desktop and say we've got a transparent nav with a big hero image underneath, if we have that on mobile, where the image is positioned might be different and our text is no longer legible. So you need to make sure that the colors that you pick stand out. People aren't going to have too much trouble reading them. And then that's also a good place to kind of hero your brand colors. So on our mobile menu, I'm pretty sure it's our black. And then if you click something, it turns red for a second, and then it takes you to the next menu. Yeah,
it actually responds so you know it's clicked properly. Yeah, that's cool.
It's interesting. I was actually on a tech website the other day on mobile, and because I have on my mobile, I've got what do you call it? The black?
Dark mode.
Yes, dark mode. Thank you. And their stuff was, because I had the dark mode on, it was like black in the behind, but then their text was like a dark charcoal on the map, so I couldn't actually read the nav.
No.
And I'm like, you're a tech site.
Did you email them? I would have emailed them. I'd be like, hi, I really like your website. It's like a really big, like global company. Well,
so
they need to sort
my one little email. But I'm like, surely someone on your team would have dark mode,
especially
and have looked at it on their mobile. But yeah, I thought that was really quite funny.
And again, that just comes back to the importance of testing it a bunch of times. Like, it's really hard to encapsulate all of the different ways that people are going to view your website, but there are a couple of tools, and I'll go into that a little bit later, that can help with that. But again, it's really just kind of throwing the widest possible net that you can and trying to catch all those different niche points. And then obviously you will hope that you get them all, but if you don't, you kind of rely on people to be like, hey.
See, give them feedback.
Give your websites feedback.
All right, so the next tip for making your website marvelous on mobile is about functionality.
So with buttons, like we touched on this a little bit in the nav, but not having them so close together.
Yeah.
Like when you're on mobile, you're going to deal with people with slightly larger fingers, or even just normally trying to click on two things that are right next to each other and touching can be a real pain point.
Again, it's about making that user experience as seamless as possible. So people really need to concentrate on where, and like I've done that, but like you're trying to hit the right thing, you hit the wrong thing or whatever. Like if you have to concentrate on hitting a button, that's not a seamless experience.
No. And if you're focusing on that, you're not focusing on the content. You're like getting aggravated. It's going to make you less engaged and less likely to keep going down that rabbit hole, which is ultimately what we want.
And on a mobile device, we're used to scrolling. So if it is a bit more spaced out, it's not uncomfortable for us to kind of move around a little bit in that scene. Whereas on a website,
Within
you kind
reason.
of got,
Yeah,
you've got a
some
bigger
pages
view.
where you're just like scrolling and it's like massive and you're like, seriously guys, did you not think about the mobile side of this?
Yeah.
We've literally had a client be like, I want this page to be 3 scrolls long. And we're like, how do you measure that? It's interesting.
But
I remember.
Oh dear.
But on the functionality side of things, it's not just buttons, it's like making sure that all of your iframes work. So iframes are like what you embed on your website.
So like a video.
Yeah, a video, or if you've got an external plugin like Jotform or
Mhm.
like a calendar thing.
Or a calculator. And
Yeah,
those kind of
all that
tools.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, if that's on your website and your web platform or developer hasn't made it by hand, that will be an external plugin that is then brought over to your site.
Mhm.
Most of those things should be auto-responsive. Sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
So it's always good to check those things. Like Google Maps, their iframe
Yeah.
isn't responsive. That just has a set width. So if you
Aw, come on,
embed...
Google.
Of all the fucking things. Like Google, you know.
You're going to be marked down for this, but we're not getting on board.
Like, I'm sure
Actually,
that...
that's a really good point. You guys think this is really important? Maybe you should make it a little bit more important for your own fucking things as well.
And like there's a...
Email Google about that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like on Squarespace, which is the main platform that we use, there's the map block and that's auto-responsive. But if we want to do something more with the maps and we use Google instead,
More
Like when we
customized
did that
function.
multiple location thing and stuff. Yeah,
exactly,
Yeah.
that I had to kind of do a bit of code to make sure that that's scaled down appropriately. So keeping that in mind is also important. Same thing for forms. Like you don't want to have a form that's hard to fill out, or length is another big one. Like I know you said you don't mind scrolling, but it's like,
To a point.
yeah, if you have to keep scrolling to get to the meat of your content, like you need to kind of space stuff out and think.
That's where I think something like a Typeform can be really useful, because Typeform allows, like, it's just one question at a time sort of thing that it goes through. So it sort of doesn't feel like it's like a big long thing or whatever. But I've even seen people do forms. I think it's pretty common. I don't need to draw this, but it's just such a habit where it's like they'll actually break it into, say, like 3 sections. So it'll be like, oh, we'll get your details and then we'll
the next
get
page.
the project details. And, and so you are filling out a really long form, but you're not scrolling all the way on mobile to fill it out.
And when it's one long form, if something goes wrong and then all your information's gone, you're like, I'm not doing this again.
Fuck this, man. I've
at
put
least
my
that
time
is
in
kind
here.
of stepped you through. That's a good point.
This is why I refuse to have forms on lightboxes. Like a lightbox is when you click on a button and it kind of shows up as a separate page, kind of.
Okay.
But if you are doing a form in a lightbox, and even on desktop, if you accidentally click and that lightbox closes and everything is gone, I'm like, no, I'm not filling that out. I'm going somewhere else. You've claimed 20 minutes of my time.
I typed my name. Well, I clicked my name from the autofill and it's gone. That's it. I've put all my effort in. I've expended my effort on this already. No, I'm like, that's actually not a joke. That's for real. So
No.
I would do that too.
Yeah. It's just
Or
frustrating.
things that don't autofill. Oh my God, I hate that so hard.
Yeah, but that's...
Please just make my life easier.
I don't know how autofill works, like, because that's obviously a browser-dependent thing.
I say I have my details saved in my browser, basically.
Yeah. So I feel like maybe that's something you can control, but I also do feel like that's a little bit outside of
Website functionality. You think I'm going off on a tangent? Is that what you're trying to say?
maybe just a little bit.
Just asking too much, you're saying.
I don't think it's asking too much to just make my life easier.
Simply
Well,
bend to
look,
my every whim.
You've already
I'm
got
just saying.
You've already got 2 global corporations to give some very important feedback to.
Yes, I'm at that level of
Yes.
authority and credibility in my life.
All right. So we've talked about functionality. We've talked about plugins.
Video for functionality as well.
Oh yeah. So again, making sure that your videos look good. That kind of comes under iframes because they're an embeddable thing, but
Yeah.
you want to make sure that you have it in a space where you can see all of the controls that
And the right settings so it doesn't get blocked.
because you don't want to have for mobile, a lot of the newer phones will block videos or not display them if they don't have autoplay turned off.
Right.
So because that's a real like, if
Data
you're-
draw, so it's an optional kind of thing. Yeah.
And I believe in browser settings you can change that, but you don't want to have to rely on users updating their own settings to see your content.
No, I would not do that.
Yeah.
I'd be like,
100%.
this doesn't work. Boo.
Yeah. It's obviously their website. It's got nothing to do with my phone. That's what I would think too.
And that's why having, like, if you've got a video banner, having a fallback image in case, because some...
Like a thumbnail option instead. Yeah.
Like with Squarespace on the earlier versions, it's not an issue now, but you had to, like, if you had a banner video on mobile, it just wouldn't show because we didn't have
Just stopped it.
Yeah, we didn't have the ability to change
So
that
we'd have to
autoplay
replace it
functionality.
out. Yeah,
So we
And
had to
that
have
looks
a
quite
photo.
bad.
Yeah, because you just get a grey block or whatever.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, this site doesn't work.
Yeah. And it hasn't been updated. They haven't checked it because it's broken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically. And if once one thing is broken on a site, you then start to doubt all of the information and
yeah.
stuff on there too. Like this is
Absolutely.
obviously completely out of date.
All right. Well, that kind of falls into display, but what tips for display have you got for us?
So making sure that your font sizes update, like you don't want to have fonts that are too big and you have words going onto multiple lines because they're not changing and responding to the width of your screen.
And it can be so subjective too. Like I was proofing a client's website the other day and I was like, holy shit, that font is like massive as fuck. We need to bring that down in the proof. And then it went to her and she was like, yeah, can we just bump the font size up a little bit? And I'm like, dude, I'm blind. Like, and I thought it was a bit garish for our thing, but yeah, I guess it is a little bit subjective on what looks good sort of thing. So it's not like getting it perfect, but it's making sure that you just at least check it and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's making sure that it's balanced with your images and stuff too. Like if, you know, your fonts, like your words are really dominating, it's not going to look good in a design perspective as well.
And again, all of those things depend on what you're doing around it and how the layout of your site looks. But as a general rule, you want to kind of have it be between like 30 and 50 pixels. And that's the other thing, using pixels instead of relative units can be like a bit of a blessing and a curse, because if you have relative units, they always try to scale to the base font or the base width size. But then sometimes, like for older people, they will have the zoom up heaps. And if you do relative units, sometimes they don't adjust. So it's like a bit of a trap. It's like, oh, if I have relative units as my font size, it'll adjust as my screen goes down. But then you kind of can alienate those people that do need it to zoom. So it's like...
I'm feeling really targeted right now because a lot of my websites, I'm like zooming in or out depending on the pages, like just the content. Because like our accounting software, I quite often zoom out because it's like you have to shuffle along the side of the page to see everything. With the other websites, I'm like 110% because I'm just like, give it to me.
Yeah. And that's the thing, if you update it in the browser or a lot of phones, like you see someone that's older, their phone is like, you look at it and there's 2 icons across the width of the thing and like...
They've like got one text message taking up the whole screen. They're like, yeah, they're coming.
That's just not when you're older. That's also when you're drunk.
Oh, God.
So
I
that's what I
wouldn't know how to do that when I'm drunk.
When I'm drunk, I like make my text really big so I can read it properly.
Hey, man, whatever gets you through, I guess.
As long as you get home in one piece.
It's like a little life hack that I found a few years ago, and I'm like, it just makes life so much easier.
Fair, like, kudos to you for updating your phone settings while drunk, though. Like,
No, when
No,
I
yeah,
get a
you just
text,
pinch
I can
it.
just pinch and zoom
oh, okay.
it. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh god, I wouldn't be able to do settings and stuff. Shit, man.
That's fine.
You see me drunk. That's not happening.
Okay, so display, we've got font sizes, making sure nothing's cut off, hidden or blocked.
Yeah, so like making sure that your images resize appropriately, or
Half people's heads aren't cut off, etc.
yeah, you also want to make sure that they've got good focal points, which is like the center of your image. So if I've got a canvas that's yay big, but my image is yay big, there's always going to be stuff that's cut off. That's just how size and spatial awareness works. But if you have it so that it's centered on the person's face, even when it goes down to
It'll
us,
space around that.
Yeah.
focal
Yeah, so
point.
if they're, rather than just leaving the focal point in the center of an image, if someone's face is up here, make that the focal point so that as it sizes down around that. That's what that means.
and so as your canvas or your space shrinks and adjusts to size, it's still got that central point. And again, sometimes you'll like go to mobile and you're like, oh, I thought that face was going to look good if it was in the center, but now it's a little bit weird because they're just a floating head. So maybe I will move it here, or maybe I'll focus it on whatever they're doing with their hands. Like,
Yeah.
there's no right or wrong way, and there's no this is always where your focal point needs to be. That very much depends on what images you're doing and what the rest of your site looks like. So just, again, being aware of it, testing it.
Checking, testing. Yeah, 100%.
Very iterative.
And page length.
So it can be a really easy trap to fall into, where if you've got a very dense, heavy page with a heap of content that, say, your services, and you're like scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and say someone wants to look specifically at pink boxes and that's all the way down at the bottom of your page, people might get bored and click off before they even get to that point, because obviously when you're shrinking to mobile, you don't have images next to each other anymore like you might on desktop.
It's like, image, text, or whatever,
Yeah.
depending on how you've had it set
And
up.
so one thing that you can do is maybe have some buttons at the top of the page that are anchor links. And anchor
Jump
links,
to sections.
yeah, you can tie them to specific areas of your site and have them click on that and it'll scroll to that specific spot.
Yeah.
Because if you've got a lot of content and there's no way to cull it, or if it's all important,
Mhm.
you still want to be able to have your mobile users get to where they want to go without having to put in that extra work.
It's kind of personalizing that user experience for whoever might be coming to find that information. 'Cause
Exactly.
You're not going to know that everyone wants to, unless all you did is sold pink boxes. I'm not sure where that example come from. But, customizing that for those people,
Mm.
thinking about them individually.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. Well, that's our
Excellent.
3 tips. We always like to do a wrap up.
Mm.
So, what have you got for us, T?
So, mobile responsiveness or websites in general aren't just about how your user will experience the site on a desktop. You want to make sure that your CTAs or your call to actions, your images, your way that they move about the site all works on smaller screen sizes and mobiles.
Yeah.
Mobile responsiveness is like a bit of a catch-all, but that counts for differing size screens. Like in the office, we've got big monitors, but a laptop is also going to have a different user experience and a different layout, and a mobile and a tablet. You need to try and account for as many of those as possible.
And I think too, in that testing phase, it's also to be aware of different types of devices and different browsers,
Mm.
because I know that's one thing that can get tripped up really easily.
Yeah, like
And
we're
again,
getting,
you can't be perfect across like all 50 million different types of mobile phones or whatever. But if you just look at your main ones at least.
yeah, and that's one thing where analytics can come in handy as well. Like if you, after your site has released, and you're like, people are visiting mainly on Apple devices or Samsungs or whatever,
Mhm.
you can then use that info to be like, I've only got 2 Apple users. This one feature isn't available on Apple, and I would like to fix that, but also I've only got 2 people that are viewing it at the moment, so it's not as much of a priority. But,
Yeah.
And obviously you should still try and fix that because SEO and whatnot, but if you're trying to prioritize stuff to do, you can use your analytics as a bit of a
driving force for that.
yeah.
So, this is me having no idea what you actually do. How do you test, like, without having 20 different devices in the office going, yep, looks good on my iPhone, yep, looks good on my Samsung, yep, tablet, laptop.
I did my Chrome, I did my Edge, I did my Safari.
Like, is there a cheap way that you do that?
For browsers, there are a couple of paid tools that I think you can do it, but for the most part, I will just check to ones that I have. So
Yeah.
I have Mozilla and Chrome, and I use Opera personally, so I check it on all of those.
I'd say because there's only like 5 or 6 main browsers anyway,
is
so that's
pretty
probably
easy, yeah.
not obviously
Like Chrome has the market share there, Edge is slightly smaller, and then you've got a bunch of niche ones. So.
Yeah.
And then for phones, I will do it on my phone, which is a Pixel, and then I will try and get like an Apple. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think Jamie or a couple of the other people have Apple phones, and then Samsung, and it's just testing it. As for screen sizes, the best thing that I can do is I usually just have my window and I can click and drag to resize it, or there's a useful tool called Screenfly, which I will sometimes use because that has a bunch of different device specs.
Mhm.
So if I click on mobile, there's a drop down and it's got Samsung Galaxy S20, iPhone
okay.
X, and same thing for tablet, same thing for desktop. And you can check all of those different resolutions and how it looks.
Yeah.
And again, it's going to be hard to make everything look perfect on all of those,
Mhm.
especially when...
It's not about perfection, it's just about doing your best, I think, and
Yeah.
having a look at those things. We'll link that tool in the show notes too.
Good idea.
Mm.
Awesome. Anything else you want to throw in, or we covered it all?
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's fairly comprehensive.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, T. Now you can go back to the office and keep working.
Yeah, that's so true.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Marketing and Margaritas. Find more free marketing tips, tricks, and laughs at rebelnation.com.au.